We're here at the BYU Recycling Center, and that machine you're hearing is a huge paper baler. The student working the baler just tipped a big bunch of paper, academic journals, and torn-up books onto a 2-story conveyor belt, leading to a dark shaft. What I see when the bale comes out on the other end of the machine is an impressive 8-foot square block of paper all strapped together. What BYU Recycling Supervisor Bill Rudy sees, though, is a bunch of trees.
I'm protecting forests when we're recycling trees.
When another student employee dumps a bin full of aluminum cans, I see, well, a bunch of cans being saved from a landfill. Again, Bill Rudy sees more.
We're like an urban mine. We're mining the metal that's on campus. People are giving it to us, and we're getting it to the metal people who can make new cans or new steel or whatever it is. Less mines are needed to provide people with materials when we recycle metal.
And when a student tosses an empty water bottle into a recycle bin, Bill Rudy, as usual, has a different perspective.
I see the people who give us stuff as donors. They are giving us something that they want us to take care of and get to the right place. So they have a stewardship, and therefore we have a stewardship.
Welcome to the Y Magazine podcast, bringing you ideas, stories, and voices from Brigham Young University. This is Whitney Archibald. Today, we're going behind the scenes to meet some of the passionate students, staff, and faculty behind BYU's sustainability efforts. Along the way, we'll learn about BYU's approach to stewardship. We'll talk about how students and faculty make it fun, from rogue street art to cardboard castles, and we'll even brainstorm ways to harness our own sustainability superpowers. You'll also find an article about BYU's sustainability efforts in the winter 2025 issue of Y Magazine. As you can imagine, managing sustainability at BYU is no small task.
We are a city within a city. Some estimates say we are a third or a quarter of Provo's population. It's a lot of mouths to feed. It's a lot of energy bills to pay. It's a lot of vehicles to find parking for. It's a lot of people to move around. And we recognize the impact of that. There is an entire ecosystem here. And the opportunities for us are to, one, lead out and be an example in the community. Two, is to minimize our impact.
That was Bremen J, the Associate Director of Sustainability at BYU. When he talks about mouths to feed, think 35,000 students plus about 2,500 faculty and staff. BYU's operation teams also provide services for the Missionary Training Center with up to 3,700 missionaries at a time. BYU has been ramping up its sustainability efforts for decades with recycling, responsible food service practices, energy efficiency, transportation options, and more. But in early 2021, BYU made it more official by creating an Office of Sustainability. And this fall, BYU was recognized as one of just 140 institutions with a gold rating from the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. Sustainability is certainly a logistical challenge, but for Bremen J, Bill Rudy, and the other enthusiastic students and faculty we're going to talk to today, sustainability is also a deeply spiritual matter.
At BYU, we have an Office of Sustainability that really looks closely at the environmental issues. And on the social side, we partner very closely with the Office of Belonging. The reason for that is that we have counsel from our own church leaders that tell us to care for the earth and care for one another. There was a great conference talk by President Nelson back in the year 2000 called The Creation. And in this talk, he said, as beneficiaries of divine creation, what shall we do? We should care for the earth, be wise stewards over it, and preserve it for future generations. And we are to love and care for one another. When I hear that, I hear stewardship and I think belonging. So as we think about our role as stewards, we have the opportunity to care for the earth, care for God's creations, and in the process, honor Him, reverence Him.
This spiritual approach is one of the reasons student Lucy Harper hurried to apply for and then accept a job in the Sustainability Office as soon as it was created.
I grew up in the Seattle area, and so environmental issues and caring about the natural world feels like a pretty natural thing there. But coming to BYU, it started to become very intertwined with my faith and my understanding of righteous stewardship, and our purpose on this earth is to care for others. And in order to care for others, we have to care for our common home. And so that is just something I'm really inspired by. I mean, I really feel the spirit of service when I'm invested in these sorts of efforts.
Lucy Harper will graduate in December 2024 in Biodiversity and Conservation. So let's take a closer look at what sustainability looks like at BYU, starting back at the Recycling Center with Bill Rudy. He comes to the recycling department with advanced degrees in environmental science and forest ecology. Rudy oversees all of BYU's recycling efforts, from cans, plastic bottles, paper, and cardboard to compost from BYU's dining service and landscaping. Most of this happens at BYU's Recycling Center, just northwest of the stadium at the Ellsworth Building. Bremen Leak and I went to visit Bill Rudy at the Recycling Center this summer. You can spot it by the huge mounds of compost and gravel waiting to get redistributed around campus. We parked by the Ellsworth Building and walked toward what Bill Rudy affectionately calls Cardboard Mountain, surrounded by bales of bundled recyclables and bins of sorted bottles and cans. Although there always seems to be rumors that what you recycle actually just ends up in a landfill anyway, that is not true at BYU, at least for plastic bottles, paper, cardboard, and aluminum and steel cans. BYU sorts all of its recyclables in-house and then ships them to different recycling companies to repurpose them. And we're talking lots of recyclables.
We're sending out, on average, at least one tractor-trailer load of compacted paper or cardboard a week, which is 20 tons.
Wow.
20 tons times 2,000 pounds is 40,000, and there's about 100 pages per pound of paper. So that's, 4 million pieces of paper.
And then there's the cardboard. The sheer volume of cardboard that goes through the facility is a relatively recent phenomenon.
I started here in about 99, 2000. We were recycling all sorts of newspaper, and that has gone away. There's almost no newspaper left on campus. And we used to do 8-9 tons of newspaper a week.
Wow.
So in part, in its place, boxes have come to residences because they get all sorts of things shipped. So we have had to change our physical infrastructure. We never used to have a dumpster for cardboard, and now we have dumpsters, big, the ones that the trucks pick up. And we never had to worry about overflowing cardboard dumpsters at move-in, but now we do.
Bill Rudy saw this new challenge as both a way to raise awareness for recycling on campus and a chance to have some fun.
We've done some fun things in the past to give people this idea of the scale of things.
Yeah.
So for a while, we were doing cardboard box castles because people like to play with boxes. But we would we have boxes. We have a lot of boxes. And then
that wasn't the hard part.
No, that was not the hard part. And we'd bring them to campus. And sometimes we had students who actually used CAD software to design this castle. It looked really cool. And we built this. The first year, we probably had a little over 1,000 boxes. And by the last year, we had 5,000 boxes.
Wow.
And that wore us out. 5,000.
Yeah.
Wow. Then somehow it turned into an art project. So they would come and they would paint and draw on it. Then, people would come by and they'd paint their mission flag on it or their state. So we had fun with it, but it also gave people an idea of there's a lot of boxes.
Yeah.
And then for a number of years, we would save the bales that we made, mostly of cardboard, and we would make a maze.
Oh.
And so it was like a corn maze, but made out of recycling bales. It was fun, and it got very popular.
One of the biggest challenges the recycling department faces is the big influx of waste that comes with BYU sporting events. After the games, Rudy and a team of employees and volunteers swoop in for cleanup duty.
At the end of the game, we mobilize all of these people, and some people are in the stands, and they're picking up bottles, and other people are sweeping things together, and then the people get out the hoses in the football stadium, and they hose the whole place down. Meanwhile, there are people on the field who are repairing the divots to the field. And then the people who are cleaning up, in concessions and things are getting their boxes, and we just pick up.
Another huge part of BYU's recycling program is repurposing landscaping materials from food and landscaping waste.
Dining services does a good job in getting us the trimmings, like mostly vegetable in a salad bar. Some of it gets eaten and some of it you have to get rid of, and so it comes to us. But most of what we get is coming from the landscape because we have several hundred acres here. And so there's a lot of grass and there's a lot of leaves, right?
Yeah.
And there's wood and branches. And if you have something wooden, sometimes furniture, sometimes play sets, sometimes pallets, we'll grind those things up. And then it goes back out. And the reason that it goes back out, well, there's several. One is for aesthetics.
Uh-huh. We
have kind of a pretty highly maintained landscape, so you'd rather have wood chips than just dirt, right? We try to improve our soils, and so you put the compost in the soil, so when it rains, there's more organic matter in there. It holds the nutrients, it holds the water, the plants grow better. You want the right amount of compost organics in your playing fields. So if you were playing rugby or soccer on a field and you just never do anything to help that field, it'll get harder and harder. It'll play less well, and when people fall, it'll be harder.
Okay.
And so there's a lot that the landscape people do to keep those fields healthy. And one of the things that they do that we supply them with is add compost to them.
And instead of using water to process and break down the compost, BYU uses another waste product, whey from the dairies that supply the BYU creamery. All of this composting and sorting and coordinating requires a lot of logistical expertise, but Bill Rudy, ever the philosopher, never loses sight of the purposes of recycling.
Sharon Eubank, when she was the General Relief Society president, gave a talk to the LDS Stewardship Group in 2019. She sees the needs of people around the world, people who have very little. And so her question was, when we waste what others desperately need, what does that do to the fabric that stretches between us as human beings? Right? So if my box goes in the garbage and I need into a landfill and I need a new box, that box comes from a tree.
Yeah.
And so I'm pulling on that tree to make that box. But if my box can be recycled and come back to me, essentially, I'm not pulling on that resource. Somebody else can use that. And the beauty of recycling is that it's every day. You can do that every day.
Speaking of daily habits, it's time to switch gears and meet the bike guy. I started hearing about the bike guy when I started researching for this episode, and people kept telling me I needed to meet him. Turns out his real name is Aaron Skabelund.
I wish that there wasn't anything notable about it. I wish we were that bike friendly that it didn't require a bike guy to be advocating for it.
In addition to being the bike guy, Skabelund teaches modern Japanese history, and he's the director of the Office of Civic Engagement at BYU. You'll see why that role is a great fit for him. Aaron Skabelund bikes to work from his home south of campus year-round.
I move around by bicycle and on foot and rarely drive. Yes, part of it is I want to do as little harm to the environment as possible. But as I do this, I feel more connected with the world around me. Nature is not something out there, right? Nature is all around us. And when I move around by bike, I'm moving at a more human scale and experiencing the world around me on a more human scale. And it allows for greater human connections with the world.
But unfortunately, biking can also be a dangerous form of transportation, particularly on Cougar Boulevard, which used to be called Bulldog Boulevard, and also happens to be Skabelund's most direct route to campus. Aaron Skabelund is not the kind of guy who waits for other people to make change. So he did something about it.
When I was hired by BYU, we wanted to live near campus, close enough that I could bike. year round. Fairly quickly, I realized that the fastest route was on Bulldog, and it was a 7-lane road, 3 auto lanes each way with a center turning lane with cars trying to execute a left-hand turn mid-block in front of 3 oncoming lanes of traffic. And I decided I'm going to ride this road, and I'm going to advocate and also live this idea that bikes belong on this street. And I think in part thanks to that advocacy, thanks to then Mayor John Curtis and others, they put in a center median. So you can no longer turn left mid-block. So a little less convenient for drivers, a lot safer. And they also sliced off the outside auto lanes and turned those into protected bike lanes. But it's become a much, much safer road.
That must feel so good to have played a part in that.
It does. And actually, we a group of us, we kind of got the tacit blessing from the mayor. But in those protected bike lanes, or mobility lanes, as I like to call them, because it's not just for bikes.
Yeah.
We took the bike markers, the little human figure on a bicycle, and we made a stencil with a tail and ears and a kind of a long snout, and a cougar.
Awesome.
and really early morning, under the cover of darkness, we transformed those into cougars riding bicycles on Cougar Boulevard. And this fall, the city touched them up. And so I kind of joke with students that this street is dedicated to you, and these cougars on bikes are dedicated to you. But I actually really mean that, because I want them to have freedom of choice about how to move around our community. If we don't restrict everyone basically to having to have a car to get around to wherever they want to go, but we give them choices, it will be a better, more inclusive a community for everyone with a higher quality of life.
I love that example of the power of advocacy. Plus, it's just fun to know the story behind those biking cougars. Making Provo and BYU campus safer and more friendly for bikes and other forms of active transportation is just one piece of BYU's sustainable transportation strategy. BYU also provides free mass transit passes to students and employees, which gives access to buses and trains in the area, making it easy for them to get around without a vehicle of their own.
You can get pretty much anywhere in Provo through our bus system. I recently went to the airport, and I got from my apartment all the way up to the airport just with public transportation. It took a little bit longer, but it definitely was good.
That was Becca Black, a student of wildlife and wildlands conservation and an enthusiastic participant in most of the sustainability activities around campus. Another key aspect of sustainability at BYU is dining services. In addition to composting, dining services works hard to reduce waste. Here's Bremen Leak.
In the dining halls, we got rid of trays. When the trays went away from the Cannon Center, food waste was reduced by about 29%, and that has made a difference. BYU has a centralized kitchen called the Culinary Support Center, or the CSC, where food is prepared and then it's served on other areas of campus. It's amazing. There are chutes underground where food waste, lettuce stems and melon rinds, whatever you might have, is sort of brushed into a chute and then ground up with the moisture extracted. And then that pulp is trucked to another part of campus and mixed with other organic waste.
Especially in Utah's drought conditions, conserving water is another big emphasis for sustainability.
We are converting our sprinkler systems to smart irrigation systems throughout campus. They can look at the weather, they can look at moisture levels in the soil and irrigate accordingly. So outside irrigation is a big piece of that, because that is water that is not going to be recycled through municipal treatment. So that's water that either sinks into the ground and maybe restores aquifers, or flows out to the lake, or it evaporates. So having those smart irrigation systems is making a big difference.
Another big effort is more sustainable energy.
BYU has its own power plant, and for many years it was operated with coal. And in 2016, the university took steps to transition the fuel from coal to natural gas. The natural gas is carbon-based, so there are some emissions, but it's a lot cleaner than coal, and it's a step in the right direction. There's also a little bit of carbon capture with the cogeneration plant. One of the great advantages of the cogeneration plant is that it is able to capture the waste heat from the turbines that produce the electricity, and then that heat is used in the heating and cooling around campus. So there's miles and miles of pipes underground, and we basically receive that heating for free as a byproduct of the university.
The Sustainability Office holds student events like clothing swaps, guest lectures, movies, etc. throughout the year, but its hallmark event is Green Week, held twice a year in fall and winter semesters. It usually kicks off with what they call a mulch and mingle, where 100 to 200 students come out to spread mulch on different areas of campus, competing in teams to see who can spread the most mulch the fastest. Another student-led campaign focuses on communication.
The students created this awareness campaign called Y Talk ahead of a visit to BYU by a renowned climate scientist, right? A scientist named Catherine Hayhoe, who is a professor at Texas Tech University and the chief scientist for the Nature Conservancy, was coming to BYU to talk about stewardship and sustainability. And she has often said publicly that if an issue is important to us, we should be talking about it. And so the students developed this idea of talking about sustainability, talking about stewardship, and talking about specific environmental problems. And so they started having conversations with their friends and then mapping those conversations using geospatial technology. We partnered with the Geospatial Services Lab at the BYU Library to track those conversations around the world. And what's fun about BYU students is, yes, they come from so many countries and so many states, but they've also been all over the world. They're everywhere. So in a few weeks, we were able to track tens of thousands of conversations about sustainability and stewardship on all 7 continents. And the goal of that ongoing campaign is to reach 1 million conversations.
I have to admit that just talking about sustainability seemed like a small thing to me until I started thinking about my own modest sustainability efforts. I recycle, try to avoid single-use bottles and products with excessive packaging. I try to reduce food waste, but I realized that even in my own family, I rarely talk about any of these efforts or about sustainability at all. If we want to see a culture shift, conversations are a big part of that. Lucy Harper was one of the students who helped launch the Y Talk campaign.
It's kind of become a political issue. And I mean, that's a huge mistake. The Y Talk campaign really helped us to broaden our scope and to get people just like trying to break down those barriers. And I think it really has made a difference. And so that has been so amazing. And it's changed me. Like, it's made me so excited to go back out into the world and like spread that to other places.
When Bremen Leak talks to students about sustainability, he likes to ask them this question.
What is your sustainability superpower? What is one thing that you're doing to make a difference? That definition for me is it's something that I'm doing currently that if everyone else did would ultimately help the planet, right? It would help the environment and not harm it. But the answers I hear from other students are really wide-ranging. It can involve dining, it can involve shopping, it can involve service, it can involve transportation, it can involve energy usage, it can involve local conservation, it can involve learning and teaching. And I'm confident that as we each do one thing to the best of our ability, the will to do that one thing increases. It becomes easier, and we find the ability to do more things and to inspire others.
A lot of these superpowers take some work and are not necessarily convenient, but as Bill Rudy likes to say,
convenience doesn't build up people. Doing things at least a little bit harder does. The ultimate inconvenience is litter.
Right.
Just dropping things on the ground. And then you're expecting somebody else. Either you don't care at all, so that's not character building, or you're expecting somebody else to come out back behind you and pick it up. But we ask people to do some general sorting. That is not as convenient as just putting it all together. But that lack of convenience provides the opportunity to be more mindful and intentional about what they're doing.
Yeah.
And therefore builds spirit and character, to be thoughtful about it, to know why you're doing it. And so we're asking people to put in some effort because we think it's worthwhile. And stewardship is effort, and that's what God is asking us for, is effort.
Thank you for listening to the Y Magazine podcast. We'd love for you to share this episode or any others with family and friends so we can grow. If you enjoyed this episode, you might also like another behind-the-scenes episode, take a tour of BYU's new music building, or a chat with President C. Shane Reese. This episode was produced by me, Whitney Archibald, with executive producer Brooklyn Romer, with help from our intern Abby Phelan-Horsepool. Special thanks to Kelsey Ney for field recording help. Original music mixing and mastering by Jarrett Davis.